We're so happy to be here with everybody today, and thank you for joining us, to our panelists who are joining us from all over the place. We do have one more panelist who will be joining us in 15 minutes or so, Christine Gilroy. But let's just start with a question to everybody that's currently here. So why don't we hear first from, I'll ask the question to Obse, then Jaren, then Andrew. But the first question, and I'll share it in the chat, how and why did you decide to major in French and Italian? What are some of the most important courses you took or experiences you pursued related to your major?
Alex, shall we ask them to introduce themselves a little bit first, what they studied? So if you, I don't know, Andrew, if you want to start, just saying your name, what you studied at Emory, when did you graduate, and what you're doing now.
I'd be glad to. So I'm Andrew Robbins. I graduated in 2010. I had a major in Italian studies and a minor in sociology. And currently I'm a PhD candidate at Rutgers University in New Jersey in Italian, actually. And I'm in my last semester, essentially.
Thank you. Jaren?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for having me. Jaren Dunning. It was college 2010 as well. I was a double major in English and Italian studies. And then after that, went to law school, and I currently serve as senior counsel, global human rights at PepsiCo in New York. So not too far from Andrew in Jersey. So yeah, glad to be here today.
Thank you, Jaren. And Opsit? We can't hear you.
No Zoom meeting would be complete without one instance of this, right?
No, okay. So maybe if you want to start answering the first question while we're waiting for Opse. Andrew or Jaren. Yeah, go ahead, Jaren.
Yeah. I guess I can jump in while I wait for her to dial back in. So just thinking, how and why did I decide? So after my freshman year, I did the study abroad program in Italy that kind of traveled around and just fell in love with the country, the culture, and the language. And as soon as I got back, it's like, this is something I definitely want to continue to dive into and to explore. And particularly the historical component of it. That was something, being there, kind of the birthplace of Western civilization was great. The second part, what are some of the most important courses I took? Definitely the study abroad. So I took that one, was a student, taught on it as kind of a TA after senior year. There are a variety of other kind of classes I can jump into as well, but I'll pause there and kick it over to Andrew and Upson.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Opse Ababia. I graduated in 1998 from the college and from Oxford in '96. I majored in French and Italian in the French. I majored in French in the French and Italian department, and also in international studies, and minored in African studies. I am now working at Emory's Office of Global Strategy and Initiatives, where I'm leading our newly created Atlanta Global Partnerships.
Okay, I can go ahead and answer the first question as well. I guess I had a similar experience to Jaren. I started at Emory as a pre-med chemistry major, and the language requirement forced me to take something, and I sort of chose Italian on a whim, which turned out to be a very good choice in the end, because Professor Aristino was very influential, and I just found it really enjoyable to take that sort of course. It was so intimate in these small classroom settings. With all these big science courses, I never met professors like directly, so I think I just got this, feeling that it was a nice type of major to have. So I kept pursuing it. And eventually, instead of doing chemistry, I just decided that I really loved learning languages and literature. So that's sort of so it was really Introduction to Italian or 101, whatever it was at Emory that, made me pursue the major.
Wonderful, thank you. Obse, the first question was, how did you decide on your major and what were some of the most important courses that you took?
Okay, so I really wanted to come to Emory, so I lied to my parents and said I was pre-med. And then once I got to Emory, I was like, yay, now I'm here. And then I really didn't think I was going to be a French major. I thought I already speak a little bit of French, I can take it, it'll be an easy A. And boy, was I wrong. But I continued with it because, it's something I felt, a connection to, because I grew up in Ethiopia and I attended a French school. So French was kind of also my first language, but I never experienced the culture, and so it was just this external thing that was, an educational experience for me. So being able to take it in college as a choice, and being immersed in it, added a lot of value for me. And later on, I got to go to a study abroad, and I really didn't think all of this would come out of my choice of trying to get an easy A, but it turned out to be great.
Wonderful, thank you.
Shall we go for the second question?
Sure, yeah.
So go back in your mind at the final year at Emory University, senior year. I think is together the best and the worst, because you're finishing, but you're sorry because you're finishing and you're afraid what you're gonna do after. So that's the question. What did you think was next for you? And what was the first step that you took after graduating? Did you know already what to do and you were clear about what you want to do, or you had to figure it out somehow that year?
Yeah, and I can jump in, or Obsa, do you want to take it first?
Sure, I'll take it. I was really petrified. I didn't want my education to end. I really did not know what I was going to be doing. And really what I did was I stayed on. I stayed on and refused to leave. And I ended up auditing some classes and being a research assistant to 2 faculty, and just ended up taking courses that I really wanted to take before, but I couldn't because, it wasn't part of your major or some reason. So I did that and applied to grad school during my my year that I gave to myself. And then from there on, I went to grad school, and I ended up going to grad school based on my conversations that I had during that year with professors for whom I did research assistant work.
Yeah, and I think back on that, when I did my first study abroad after my freshman year, we were taking kind of a team talk class it's called Medicine and Compassion. It was kind of a reflective journaling class taught by 2 med school professors. And that's kind of where I really started to reflect on what I wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to help people in some way. As hey, you're at Emory, is okay, is it med school, is it something? And I really kind of fell in love with this thought of like advocacy, being an advocate. Fast forward to fall of senior year, I actually studied abroad in Milan. It's like no better way to start off fall of your senior year of saying, okay, I'm going abroad for 4 or 5 months. And I knew I wanted to go to law school. I was an English and Italian double major, so some type of grad school is probably in the future, right, as you think about that. And I actually took the LSAT in Rome at a middle school, which was great. And the morning of, this is true, Rome fashion, the morning of the LSAT, there was a strike, so they had to walk versus take the subway, but that's a whole different thing. So I knew, law school was in the future, but really for me, reflecting on the time abroad, being exposed to different people, different cultures. And really, I worked, for the UN eventually in Italy during law school, which was a great experience. But I really look back on those two, experiences abroad, of one, position yourself, in situations to meet people who are going along the same path you want to, of, hey, international studies, human rights, things of that nature. And then just constant exposure to different people and being able to, flex your style, mold your style is a great experience. So I think those are probably the two courses or points that kind of help propel me toward kind of my legal career, kind of focusing on what I do now.
Well, I had a similar, I was actually planning to go to med school. I still took the MCAT at the end of my junior year. And when I received the scores, which were just average, I can admit, not good enough that I felt like I could apply to med school and safely get in. I was in Rome at the time studying abroad, and I was so filled with joy from that time that I decided, oh, I think I want to do something with this. And I just, in a moment, I still remember it. It was like, April 15th or so, I just like dropped the med school idea in an afternoon, and decided I didn't know what I wanted to do, actually. So after that year, I decided I have to get back to Italy. And I got a job actually as an administrator at the university, or like the study abroad institution that I had been at in Rome. And I did that for the year after graduation while I applied to grad school. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, and that was not so scary at the time. But I'm sort of in a similar position now where I don't know what I want to do. So it's like I'm having this maybe like a replay of after I graduated. So
can I answer too? I'm an alumni, not of Emory. So I defended my thesis in Florence in 1996. So the night that I had a party at night, with my family, with all friends. Then I went to bed and I cried all night long. And I said, what am I gonna do now? I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. So I was talking to my father, my brother, and they gave me as a graduation gift one plane ticket, like for wherever I wanted to go. So I decided to, of course, I decided to choose the most expensive one and the furthest one from Italy. There was Australia. So 2 weeks after my graduation, I went to Australia, and I said, okay, I'm gonna take a year off. So talking about study abroad, going abroad, working abroad, to me and apparently to Andrew and Jaren and Opsel too, helped a lot to figure it out what you wanted to do. I didn't know what to do. My degree was in Japanese and education. So, and I ended up going to Australia, ended up teaching at the Italian Institute of Culture, teaching Italian as a second language. That's how everything started, no? And then I went back to Florence, I went back to the States to study, to do my PhD. So it came after, but it came out. But I'm thinking about the study abroad and going away for a while after, unless like Jaren was really clear, no? You knew what you wanted to do and you did it. If you don't know, take your time. Don't worry about it. And actually, I was thinking, if somebody else wants to jump in and say something, feel free to do it. Like, it doesn't have to be ta, 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 ta. And Sophia, Amber, Achille, to the students that are here, you're welcome to say what you want whenever you want.
I wanted to say something about studying abroad. I know we're probably going to come back to it in a little bit. But that to me was a really big, like a major milestone in my life. The fact that I was able to study abroad, and I did the Lille program for 6 months. And as I told you, I had always learned French in school, but really disconnected it from like the culture and the real life. And so when I went to Lille, I was like, oh, it's real. They exist. There are people. They're speaking French. It's a country, And so, like, being immersed in the culture, adds a whole level, a whole new component to learning the language. It's not just something you're studying in books, so it opens up a whole new world, and it makes it real that you can actually take this tool and travel with it and use it as a key to open so many doors. So I mean, studying abroad, to me, I can't recommend it, any greater. It's just really, to me, was really valuable.
Yeah, I have to second or third that. I feel like if I could have done more time abroad, I probably would have spent more time abroad than at Emory, just in just looking back at it. But yeah, so pivotal. I just think about my first trip after freshman year, and I'm first generation kind of everything as you think about college to grad school. So actually the first time I ever got on a plane literally was flying from Atlanta to Rome. And I was like, let's go, let's do it. I'm excited about it. And you just think about, I think, Obsa, to your point, I always go back to perspective of being exposed. Like I've lived in Italy, Austria, like across just working, since then. And it always adds something different to it. Definitely don't speak French. I won't go that far by any means, but I think it's something I'd highly recommend for those who have the opportunity. It's going to give you so many experiences. While you may think very narrowly now, hey, how does this X degree translate into something else? I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, and I'm 8 years into my career now, and had a few different types of careers along the way. Think more of the journey and not the destination is probably the best advice I could give you, of like, what are the cool things you can do and experiences you can get along the way.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a question. I wanted to kind of come back to something that Andrew said, but this is a question for all of our panelists. Andrew, you mentioned the language requirement, and you had taken Italian from quite a beginning level, and that was sort of your entry into that. So, whether a language is something that we have as part of our family heritage or our formal education, or it's something that we're sort of forced to take. I would love to hear what the panelists have to say about, the importance or the is the language requirement important, or what is the role of language in the overall humanities curriculum, to your thinking?
Fantastic question, Alex.
Yeah, it is a good question, especially because at Rutgers, there is no language requirement. And it almost baffles me because it was so foundational to my experience in college that you just learn a language and that's what you have to do. I had a sort of a strange path because in high school, I was doing Spanish, like most people in the South. And I just didn't enjoy it. I mean, the teachers weren't so great, and I didn't enjoy learning a language. So when I went to college, I was like kind of annoyed that I have to take a language. And now I learn languages. I mean, I've learned several since college on top of Italian because I enjoy it so much. And I realized how much it is, like Jaren was saying, it opens your eyes to so many different aspects of the world. And you get to integrate yourself into different cultures, and you get to meet people in a way that you don't just by learning one. And it's been, I mean, really the defining characteristic of my life, learning a language. So I would say language requirements are very important.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of what I can add. There's so many, highlights as well. And I think, the humanizing point of it, of having to step outside of your point of view and everything you've known and say, okay, how do I do this? And approaching it from the history of it. And that's what I love so much about the Italian program, and having, the Italian studies component of, hey, I'm literally in Rome learning Italian, that you can see it and connect, and you have that connection. And I think it's just a great critical thinking exercise as well. Like I can't tell you how many people, something I look for whenever we're hiring, of like, okay, have people really stretch themselves to go, and you don't have to be proficient, but have you at least tried, right? Because it's an entirely different way of thinking and challenging yourself versus, hey, can I memorize, these 5 or 6, bold-faced words and answer it? It's a very different way of just kind of developing yourself.
Yeah, and I wanted to say also that it's absolutely critical that, language learning be required in an undergraduate higher education institution. It's essential to me. So it's not just only about the language, but it's also your ability to learn intercultural skills, to be able to understand the others and go between cultures and between personalities and points of views and mitigate between all of those. And that's what language learning gives you access to. It's not just the language, it's beyond the language. Because if it's just the language, you could learn that in a textbook. You could go and just pick up a book and learn it. But being able to learn it in school gives you more than just a language. It gives you access to that culture and an extra skill set that's absolutely needed in the workforce and in life in general.
Could you please, the three of you, publish a paper about it and send it to everybody?
Yeah.
So practically, they already kind of started answering the third question that we had prepared, that it was about what skills did you cultivate through your humanities education on majoring in Italian or in French that have served you in your professional journey. So can you provide an example? For Andrew, it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, I have maybe the easiest answer to that because my profession right now is, doing a PhD in Italian requires that I've taught Italian. And of course, doing a PhD in a language means that you have to do other languages. They force you to do several languages as well. So, I was very happy to do those. I took classes in German with undergrads, so that was like really enjoyable. But I think even outside of the language itself allowed me to see systems better. Like once I really learned a language, it allowed me to take a better meta perspective on things. And I think it makes you, like Jaren was saying, a better critical thinker in just a way that maybe I didn't see before. And learning anything outside of languages, if you're learning like a new technique in your job, it's always a little bit easier, I think, because you have this skill to see like sort of the whole overview a little bit better, maybe. And I found that that's one of the best things about the humanities is it's combining this emotional side with this practical side. So.
And yeah, and I completely agree with you on that, Andrew. This just being able to see the systems view and learning structures. And for me, what I learned from like a skill set that I learned from learning languages is that interpersonal skill and being able to get along with people, but not only just get along, but understanding perspectives. And speaking about language requirements, I want to clarify that I also learned Arabic at Emory because I thought that it wasn't fair that my language learning be French because I already spoke French. So I wanted it to be fair. And so I decided to actually go and learn a language as it was required for everybody else to learn a new language. And so, I just wanted to let y'all know I'm not just tooting my horn about French when I already spoke French. But the skill set really is the interpersonal skills and relationship building, which is what I'm using in my work right now and in my career. And I really didn't think I was going to get out of learning languages, that I was going to get out of a skill of relationship building. I really didn't value it then. And now that I've been in my career of outreach and relationship building, I see how valuable languages are for that.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I mean, obviously your point on, the interpersonal skills, and I just think of, influencing. That's what we do to a certain extent when you're in the professional world of how do you influence. And I think the humanities and language, really helps you understand others, but also understand yourself as well, where your hard points, your soft points, okay, where do I need to learn and grow versus, okay, maybe this is something I don't want to, like I want to keep this belief or this thing. And I think the other piece, when I really look back on the humanities and kind of what it set for me, it's just this like curiosity, right? I think I had this innate curiosity to learn and to ask questions, but I really felt like it was fostered, being both, an Italian studies and a lit major of, great mentors. I think, Andrew, you mentioned, it felt like a family of, hey, I'm interested in this. Who can I talk to about this? And that's something, intellectual curiosity and being self-driven in that is not something you can teach. It's something you can foster and help grow and nurture. But that's another thing, I think has definitely helped propel me in my career, but it's also something we look for, as we hire or as we recruit, of being able to see, hey, where are the people who are going to go ask those questions and really dig into it and do it in an appropriate way. So yeah, that's my few additions to both of their comments, which I agree with as well.
Thank you so much. We want to welcome our fourth panelist who's joined us, Christine Gilroy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Would you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you studied at Emory and how you came to that major?
Sure. So I am Christine Guillory. I was a double major at Emory in international studies. My focus was conflict and security and Europe. So I learned a lot about bombs in the Cold War. And then I was also a major in Italian studies. And I came to that major. International studies, I think I just was sort of doing a lot of the political science. I think it's just really popular at Emory. So a lot of my in 101 courses were leading down that path. I thought maybe I would be an English major initially. And then I heard the tail end of one of our other speakers, and it sounds very similar to my story. I had studied French and Latin in high school. I studied a lot of French. I took 13 years of French, and I was sick of French. And I didn't want to take any more French. So for my language requirement, in fact, I may have tested out a language requirement, but I remember my advisor was a physics professor who had very little interest in engaging with me, and nice person, but just like no engagement. And my sister also went to Emory. She had already graduated, and a friend of hers had this really great advisor, Judy Raji-Moore, who he said, you should ask Judy if she'll be your advisor. And so Judy was my advisor. I think by the end of my first semester, maybe the beginning of my second, but in any event, I took Italian. And then from there, I had taken so many Italian classes that I had enough, at least for a minor. And so then I went to Siena and I got a major, and that was the end of that. So I fell into Italian, fell in love with and fell into Italian.
That's wonderful. It sounds like Italian won over your English major, and it won over your French history as well. Italian won. That's great.
Can I ask you, what did you do in Siena? Was it a study abroad program or?
Yes. So I was at the University of Siena for 7 months. I went second semester because that was when it was available when I was at Emory, and I finished up. Let's see, what did I take? I took a couple of courses. One was like it was in the political science department, but I want to say it was like sociology of the family. And then I don't remember the other course that I took at the university. And then we had the required, Italian studies program that was through the, what is it? I think it was like Università di Stranieri or something like that, which is just basically the language courses for foreigners. And so those were the 3 courses that I took. I stayed in the dorm in Siena. And in fact, I stayed for 7 months so that I could stay for the Palio. So I went to Palio in Siena in July.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So what should we do? Should we ask Christine another question so she can get back into the... Christine, we've been talking about... no, you said why you decided to study Italian. And what did you do? How was your last year at Emory? Like your senior year? Did you know already what you wanted to study, what you wanted to do next? Were you sad? Were you happy? Tell us everything about your last year.
We don't have enough time for that. But I can tell you, my last year, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a better writer. I thought that I would go to law school because I thought it would make me a better writer. It did eventually when I went to law school. I thought it would make me a more short-winded communicator, and it did not when I eventually went to law school. But so I applied to some law schools very half-heartedly, didn't try very hard. I had taken the LSAT, kind of, whatever. And I had a lot of social distractions that were not things that I am happy about. They were very unpleasant experiences. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times when we're in the last year of school, whether that's high school or college or whatever, there are a lot of, some of it is loss. It's the stages of grief, and people are going through that, and so they make bad choices. I didn't make any life-changing choices. I just felt like it was hard. There were a lot of leadership changes in student affairs that year, and I without getting into the details, it was actually a very hard year for me. Socially, I had great friends, I had a great community around me, but I just didn't feel... My favorite thing about Emory is truly my degree in Italian and the support that I had from that community. But there were a lot of things about being at Emory at that time that were difficult for me, at least, and I think for a lot of my peers. So in any event, it was not an easy year. It wasn't, it was easy academically, I was doing well. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I didn't focus on that. So then, so I half-heartedly applied to law school. I went to home to New York. I'm originally from New York. I went home to New York without having been admitted to any law schools, kind of thinking what am I gonna do for a year? Maybe I should be a paralegal. Long story made measurable. I put my resume in with a temp agency that my parents' friend worked at, that hired paralegals for law firms. And this gentleman who was the executive director of a museum was looking for an administrative assistant temp. He was trying to hire a temp, and he went to a paralegal firm, hiring firm, because he wanted a temp who had some chops, right? Someone with not just a basic education. And so I got hired to be this temp at a Yiddish museum for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, I was offered a job. And so I worked at a Yiddish museum for a year in New York, in between, which was a very nice segue because of my language studies. So that international experience kind of came back to me again. And my European background, right? My conflict and security is all about the Second World War. It's great. It came together.
I love hearing this story of not only this sort of home-based community that you had in your Italian major, but also the way that all of our panelists were really able to sort of, in unexpected situations, sort of land on your feet and really feel comfortable in your own skin, as it were, in all of these sort of unexpected work and personal situations. That's really great. Thank you. My next question, we've been talking a lot about careers and what the humanities has done to your work life. And I'll put this question in the chat because it's kind of long, but what role does your humanities education or major in French and Italian play in your life beyond your career? How has it enriched your life in things outside of your job? And also, I'm really curious to know, how do you foster French or Italian in your life today? Maybe we could start with Jaren, Andrew.
I can go if you.
Okay, you want to take it? I'll follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I have like the easiest answers because I'm still doing a PhD in Italian. So I mean, every day I'm using it. I mean, I've done translations from Italian into English. You know, half of my work life, I get, or for the last 10 years, I've basically been in a bilingual work environment. Um, and and of course, when you're, you know, in the higher reams of academia, you also like interact with people in other languages, right? So I mean, in French and German. So I'm like constantly speaking in other languages. Actually, for some days, I'm always speaking in a different language. So I mean, that's been really interesting because there's only been 1 year where I've been in a completely English speaking environment. And that's when I was serving tables at a restaurant in DC between my master's and my PhD. And that was the only time. But even then, I was still talking to tables in a different language when they were from Italy or France or whatever. So it's, you know, I have this a much more easier experience to show how it crosses over. But even now that I'm leaving the university soon, and I don't plan on being in the university after my PhD, I'm planning on going into private industry or something. I still imagine that I will be using my languages constantly. You know, not only speaking with other people in Europe, for example. I mean, my partner is Austrian, so you know, I'm often in German. Um, but also like reading in a different language. I mean, this is something that I do on purpose to try to keep my mind fresh, right? So, you know, these little things that outside of my usual work, I'm just trying to constantly learn. And I think really the humanities education that I've gained has been a really fundamental factor in wanting to keep learning all these different types of, you know, not just languages, but novels from different countries and different cultures. And so it's been really important for me.
Andrew, you did your master at UNC, right? No,
Georgetown.
Georgetown, and then the PhD at Rutgers. Okay.
Yes.
I guess I can jump in. Definitely agree. Well, I'm not speaking Italian or French or German all day. I definitely look back, and for me, it just goes back to intellectual curiosity. At the end of the day, you know, your education doesn't stop when you get your degree, right? And you continue to grow and develop. And I think to Andrew's point of what are those ways every day you push yourself? I definitely think for me, you know, working global company around human rights is always taking the global perspective. You know, Andrew, you mentioned just with the news, right? It's like, how do you take a broader perspective than just the narrow set? And how do you continue to grow and see? And I think that's something that's so important of, you know, don't take just these 4 years as education, or these are the 4 years I should be, you know, working to actively develop myself. It's all the time, right? Little moments here, interactions. You know, Andrew's point, hey, it's that interaction with that person. How did I grow from it? And it just thinking through that, I think that's kind of one of the mindsets I've taken away from it. I'm trying to see, you know, how does it enrich civic, volunteer, community? Yeah, I definitely think, you know, a broader sense of community. You know, for people who have traveled, yeah, I think Obsa, you may have mentioned, you know, the us or them mentality begins to, you start to see the us far more, right? As you travel and you see that we're all far more alike than we're unalike at the end of the day. And I think being able to bring that into conversations to humanize different things. And I think, you know, to a few of the points that have been made, I work, you know, PepsiCo, we're in, you know, 200 plus countries. So I'm working with people across the world, and there are a lot of nuances you need to understand, but there are also a lot of nuances you need to look for, right? And to ask the questions of, hey, what does this mean? What does that mean? I know what I don't know sometimes may be just good enough. So I think those are a few of the ways. You know, how do I foster, or how to sort of play a role in my current life? Always trying to get back to Italy anytime I can. Would definitely be the first piece. If I could get stationed in our Rome office, that'd be great. No, but and I think it's just, you know, continuing to, I don't know, just explore, whether it's like, you know, still reading, although not as proficient as I used to be, still give it a crack from time to time, or music or things like that, that you just continue to be exposed. So I'm kind of big on just continuing to push and grow overall.
I mean, I second what everyone's been saying, and really, it's outside of careers, it's perspective, right? It's so this language learning gives you a whole different perspective, a much bigger pool to swim in, and it's really about evaluating things that are happening in the world and your relationship of how you fit into the whole, the whole shape of it, the whole sphere, and it's just having different perspectives. I mean, that's where the value comes in of language learning. And for me, looking at, well, how else am I using it outside of careers? Well, with my children are also learning French, so it's speaking to them and showing them, the value of language learning, whether it be French or whatnot. But really, it's the stories we read in class, is the books, it's the culture, life, and and all of that, and it's the whole experience of it influences you as a person, not just the career.
I can't really add much more to that. I think everybody covered it well. I would just say that for anyone who has not studied the language, or when you meet people who have not interacted in that global world, you can sort of almost, in an instant see it, that there is and that's also true, like when you're abroad, right? You meet an Italian or a German or whatever who's never been outside of their world, and it's a very different world. So my point is, you can know a lot of things. I know a lot of things. I bet everybody on this call knows a lot of things, and you can meet someone who knows a lot of things, and you know none of the same things. And having a deeper understanding of that has been a constant influence. That's how I use my degree, all the time. Of just knowing that this person is very different from me, doesn't know all the same things that I do, and that has weighed heavily on their positions and their opinions and their cultures and their values and all of those things. I mean, currently I am an attorney for health system, and often when we're dealing with very complicated healthcare situations, that is heavily influenced by the culture of the patients that we serve. That is a big impact, and healthcare obviously is such a big part of what everyone's having conversations about right now. But how people make end of life decisions even is impacted by where they're from. So that within the absence of having that exposure, I can tell you, like, certainly when I work with people, whether that's as colleagues, as opposing counsel, whatever it is, when I'm working with people who have never had those other experiences, they just don't have that deeper appreciation of the fact that someone has a completely different worldview, and it's right? Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just their view. And then I would say, I wish that I did more in Italian. It's one of those things that it's always on my to-do list of spend more time on this in terms of enriching your life. But I think culturally, the things that I enjoy most, whether that's traveling or music, a lot of those things are Italian influenced. And I could still, trip my way through a conversation. I'm not nearly as proficient as I would like to be. And I can read the paper just very slowly. So
yeah, that was my question. Like, how is your language now, except for Andrew and Opse, that I know that is good. But Jaren and Christine, you said it. What about you, Jaren? How is your Italian?
I would say the same. Can still trip through conversations if needed or called upon. Reading has always been easier. I feel like that's one piece. If I could go back, instead of doing a semester, I probably would have gone for the year. Of just like the immersion. I think, Obuzo, you mentioned that, of like being immersed yeah, that would be my one piece. Hopefully I can get back at some point and actually spend some time. But yeah, not as proficient as I used to be. That's definitely the short answer.
But I don't think you lose the love of it, right? Like I'm sorry, Simona.
No, go ahead, Christine.
I don't think you lose the love of it. Like if someone said like, what, are you going to pick up a new hobby or, something with your free time? What are you going to do? I would definitely say I'm going to sign up for an Italian course. Like I'm going to refresh my skills. That's something that I continue to have a love of. And I wish that I spent more time on it on a continuous basis just to continue cultivating it, because it's, for those who are still learning and doing, it's just beautiful to be able to communicate in other languages. And to connect with people on that level. I mean, I can say people, certainly, I'm sure everyone has had this experience, and maybe you've already said this, but like when you go someplace and you recognize, the Italian, and you respond to them in Italian, the entire energy shifts, it's like in a different conversation. And depending on how much wine I've had, we're having a great conversation. I can talk fine. I don't have any problems there. All my inhibitions are gone, and I don't care if I conjugate the verb. So I care much more about that when I'm being, self-conscious about my skills. But regardless, the love remains. So
I have the same experience. As I said before, I studied Japanese when I was in undergrad, and of course I had to stop because I had to learn English, because I had to come here and study in English, and it was really hard. Worse than Japanese. I prefer to study. It was easier for me to study Japanese. But anyway, last summer I took Japanese again. So as soon as I had it, we were online, a little bit more free time because I don't do the commute to go to Emory. And so I decided to take a course in Japanese. So I think it's stuck with you, the language that you want to, as soon as you have the opportunity, as soon as you have free time. I would love to go to Japan and study for 6 months, do a study abroad in Japan, maybe a working abroad. If I can figure it out something. And one more question that I wanted to ask you was, what do you wish you had known while you were an Emory student? And what advice would you give to the students now at Emory?
Okay, hold on. I wish I had known how valuable language learning was going to be for my career. I really thought that when I was in school, that it was just one of those boxes I had to check to be like, okay, language learning, I learned it, that's done. Now let's go save the world. And I just really didn't think that, hey, wait a minute, this is really going to impact my career and my life. It's not just a language requirement that I have to check off. And so that's one thing that I wish I knew, because I would have used it even more than that I've ended up using it. Because I think I ended up using it just by happenstance and just being surprised that, oh, wait a minute, you mean this is valuable? I'm really going to use it in my life and in my career. And one example for me is I was looking for work, and I was looking for work, like, let's say, in the UN or humanitarian organizations. And somehow I bumped into Alliance Française in Atlanta. And, and I told the director then, hey, listen, I'm not going to be here for long because I'm looking for other stuff. So I'm just here so I can help you out for a little bit. I understand if you don't want to hire me right now, but I'm going to be looking for work while I'm here, right? And so he looked at me, he said, okay, fine, can you start Monday? And I ended up staying there for 10 years, and it had a huge impact on me. It opened up this arts and cultures world that I had really closed off and put away, thinking, oh, this doesn't matter to, changing the world or making a difference, because it's just language and it's just arts and culture. It's not political science, and it's not this, but it really, ended up influencing me, and I ended up using my French language skills. And while I'm telling you the story, I forgot the second question. But I really wanted to emphasize that point that, you know, you don't think you're going to use it, or you might not think, but really you are. There are so many instances and places where you are actually going to use this language skill.
Second question was, what advice, what tips would you give to students, to Emory students?
You know, be open to using the language skills. Be open to exploring it beyond just a requirement or checkbox that you have to check as part of the language learning requirement. Be open and flexible to it, shaping your life or influencing your life in one way or another.
Thank you.
It's a hard one to follow. Such good advice. I'm just like taking notes over here too. As I think back, and I don't know how it was for everyone else, but I felt like there's a lot of pressure on things being binary, right? Of like, hey, I get this degree, I get it in med school, that gets me something. Everyone's focused 10, 15 years down the line versus being very present and very active in your development and your time on campus. And you'll see this as you get a few years out and you look back, you're like, oh man, you know, as you see those opportunities, and they can be small things like, hey, I remember taking a class on like voice and diction. So I knew, hey, I'm going to eventually, you know, try and go to law school. This is probably a good thing to prep. Like you can build skills and grow versus thinking this Italian degree has to get me this thing. Like, how is it helping you grow and develop, and really focus on skills? Because that's really what you're doing at the end of it, is like you're collecting skills one day you're going to put into some package and use to do something. And also you mentioned, you know, I'll never forget being in law school, and during my first year, University of Georgia, we were kind of expanding a program and trying to create a partnership with the UN. And it was in Torino. So I ended up working for UNICRE there. And the only person who had Italian as a major in the law school, and like, I actually want to do human rights law as well, let's foster this. So talk about being able to go somewhere and work in a language for a while, and that being kind of an opportunity to help get me in that door, and then kind of, you know, continue to build, but really focusing on the skills. It was never, hey, that degree is going to get me this and this thing. And I feel like there's always a lot of I don't know if other people saw that in their peers of, you know, they're so focused on other things, they forget to be really active. And I guess if I had to leave advice, I guess kind of 3 points, you know, be humble, be curious, and be active as you go through your time. I think those things have always kind of served me well as I reflect on situations.
I'll go next. I think because I'm going to piggyback on a lot of what Jaren said. So I think collecting skills and then also collecting relationships. I wish that I had held tighter to some of the mentor relationships that I had. So, you know, if you have a professor that you really like, stay in touch with that person. I mean, I've emailed some of my professors now years later, just to ask them about a book that we read or some, you know, random question. And they're always very enthusiastic about reconnecting with me. And those are, you know, one of the blessings of being at Emory is that it is a wonderful resource. Like, you have some of the best professors in the country, some of whom are very low key about the work that they've done. So, you know, that's the other thing, is like, learn about the people that you are around every day. Just, you know, there's a lot of people you're interacting with that you may not think they just, you know, are humble. And so you may not realize like the access that you have that you won't have at other stages of your life. And by the same token, I think the other thing, which is much more global, not specific to the humanities, but also remember that a lot of the people that you interact with every day in a college and university setting, particularly young people who are in like, and I'm not talking about your class peers, but like young leaders. So, you know, young administrators, young professors are young. And so, you know, don't always, I wish that I had really thought about that. I mean, it's some courses where I felt like professors gave me, you know, a hard time, or, you know, especially as I got to more senior level courses where it was like, you know, 7, 8 people in the class, and I did okay, but I just felt like, I don't know, I took this class on riots that I just felt like the professor was really hard on me. And I look back on it and he was like 2 years older than me. So, you got to remember that a lot of people are going through growth. And that's, I think, something I really forgot in undergrad, that a lot of people are going through young growth, and you can't take, sometimes people make life-changing statements to you, or you take it to heart because you're young, and you have to remember that they're young, and you can't always let that change your course. The advice that I would give is also, piggybacking on what Jared said about being present. One of the harder decisions that I made from a kind of culture of your school standpoint was going to Siena, because it was second semester, and that is a very busy time at Emory, where a lot of things are going on socially, and first semester is kind of when a lot of people in my social circle at the time, which was a long time ago, but that was when a lot of people went abroad. And so a lot of my friends were abroad when I was at Emory, and then second semester I was going abroad. So it was a very hard decision to make. It was definitely the best decision that I made. And so being present in the, what is going to be the long-term impact of the decision that you make. Like Siena was just, no shade to Florence, but it was just way better. It was, full immersion.
From Florence, be careful.
I'm sorry. I loved visiting Florence. Florence was great. I would go on the weekends. I took the bus. It was lovely. But the immersion that you got in Siena was just so intense, right? There's not as many people who speak English and all of that. So, I think you also have to and that's hard, I think, when you're between the ages of 17 and 22, or even in graduate school. It's hard to make decisions where most of the people that you interact with in a program or in a class setting or socially or whatever are not on the same path necessarily. And those things that make us unique in this program are the things that are part of, from everyone, what everyone is saying is part of what makes us excellent and what makes us happy. And that's the part that you really, from an advice standpoint, that's the part that you're really going to value years down the road. So that's my advice.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say everyone's advice is very sound. And I don't have much to add, but I mean, it's hard to speak of my college years in any form of regretful way, because I don't really regret any of the choices that I made. But I do wish that I had pursued certain things a little bit more seriously. And I think that mainly has to do with career stuff. Like, I wish I had thought more about what I wanted from a career, because the whole time I was at Emory, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to go to med school. And then as soon as I stopped that, I had no idea what I was going to do. And not that I regret having done that, but I wish I had figured out earlier what it was I wanted from my life, like what sort of career would be important to me. But that sort of goes into the other advice that I would give, which is college is a confusing time, I think, socially and academically, and you don't know it's pretty normal to not know what you like and who you are. But I think that's actually part of the best part about it is that you are learning everything about yourself through academic classes, and also through the people that you meet. And I think that was one of the things I wish I had known more, which is that it's okay to be confused and not to be assured of who you are and what you want from your life.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is so great. We do have a little bit more time. If there are any questions from our other faculty members or any of the students that are on our call, you can add a question to the chat or feel free to chime in. Or if any of the panelists would like to add anything or ask questions of one another. Simona?
If you have any question about Emory, how is Emory now? How is French and Italian now? Yeah. But I will ask the students too. You have this opportunity. You have 4 people here to ask whatever you want to ask. Come on. You can ask in Italian or in French or in English, as you want. By the way, grazie mille, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you so much. And I was, Simona, I was telling everybody before we got started about your brother's cooking class yesterday. So we'll have have to do an encore when we can get everybody together in person and have some time together, hopefully soon.
Yeah, we need to fly him over here
Yeah.
and give us the
And get all of our panelists in one room too. Yeah. Anything anybody would like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess while we wait for see if there are any questions, I think really just to Simona's point, do lean on alumni. I think that's something I started doing probably a bit more junior year, really into senior year. There are people who've done similar things or are kind of out there, you know, even if you want to cold add someone on LinkedIn, you know, shorten your own learning curve, where you kind of a big proponent of that as well, where there are people who've done some of those things, and always take it with a grain of salt, right? And kind of add your own flavor to it. That's something I've definitely, I think, Christine, you mentioned around having mentors, like Judy was a great mentor of mine. I remember having in law school, I was like, hey, what do you think about these things, right? Of just having good people on your bench that are like helping coach you is always really helpful. So definitely as you guys go through it, you know, reach out to people. I've always found people to be really helpful and accessible.
I have a question. So we've done this panel in a lot of different humanities departments. And one of the things that's been really fun for us is hearing about those moments and memories that stand out all these years later from a particular class or a particular book you read. It's just something that, I don't know, just has never left these panelists. So I'd love to hear from each of you if there was a particular class you took at Emory or a particular moment in a class in your language that you just look back on as really important. And to give an example, in the German studies panel, we had one panelist talk about how the kind of the drudgery of doing those repetition exercises with a partner, like, you know, speaking to each other and learning the language in those early classes, taught her how to listen really well. And she maybe didn't understand that in the moment. So I'd love to know if you guys have similar moments of, you know, that are surprising to you all these years later.
I'll go. So I have lots of distinct memories from both Siena as well as just being in Italian classes. I still remember what Judy Reggimore's office looks like. And I would say a particular like book moment kind of thing would be Dante's Inferno. So, you know, that was after I'd already chosen my major, and I think we did like a translation and studied the actual content. But I remember it's not so much the memory of it that sticks with me, but I do remember a lot of things from the book, but I'm always kind of, you know, patting myself on the back when I notice the references to Dante's Inferno in like TV media. Like there's always these, you know, constant references. People borrow that text for almost everything. And so I'm always kind of like the annoying person in my family who's like, actually, that's the 6th level of hell. But it's kind of a nice like literary reference to have because it's just so popular. So I think that's probably the one that jumps out at me the most.
I definitely remember, to go on the listening point that Sophia just talked about, the first day of my Italian class, I remember they always did this gimmick where they brought in an Italian speaker to converse with the professor, like, you know, and it was Christine was conversing with this guy from Rome that they had him for a year, I think. He was like over for a year. And they, you know, the conversation was so simple now that I'm trying to remember it. You know, it was like, ciao, come stai, you know, sono di Roma or something. But back then I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. And years later, I still remember that moment really vividly. And that was at like one of the first days of class as a freshman. And then the other thing that I really remember, like in terms of text, was I was reading in Simona's class, actually, a Calvino book for a final project. And at the same time, I was reading Marx. And for some reason, those two things together, I was reading Marx in a sociology class. And that was the first time I was confronted with both those authors. And it was like this weird combination that still sticks in, and I still read them today. So those are the memories that I, you know, they were at the one end of and another of my college experience, but I remember them very vividly.
I have a vivid memory. It's just always in my head, and it's a funny story. When we were in study abroad, I went to Lille, and there were I think there were 6 of us who went on that program. Our first night in Lille, we were all there together. We were really hungry. It was late at night, so we go to the closest cafe, and we're sitting there, and one of my classmates, her name is Holly. And so the waiter comes and they're talking, and she tells him her name. She says, my name is, je m'appelle Holly. And he's like, Oli? Oli. And Oli in French means in bed, And so she's like, no, not Oli, And then he says, okay, so what can I get you? And she's, one of those really like health conscious, people. And she wanted an herbal tea. And so she says, je voudrais du thé à l'herbe. And he looks at her and he's like, oh, no, madame, no. And that's, pretty much I think she asked for something she wasn't supposed to ask, maybe for some weed. And that's not what she intended to ask. But all to say is that, that moment, I think, made me realize the importance of being there, the importance of learning languages, but more so in my field of conflict resolution and peace building. You can see how easily misunderstandings can occur when folks are not able to open their eyes to different perspectives or different cultures and different systems, and how easily clashes can occur. So this question of learning languages and learning about other cultures is just absolutely vital, and that experience to me just sticks in my head, and it just exemplifies the need for learning languages.
Yeah, I feel like I have so many funny stories like that of saying the wrong thing. You don't really know until everyone starts laughing. You're like, was it me? And it was like, yeah, it was you. As I think back, I feel like there were so many, moments like those in classes, and I think the biggest piece I kind of take away is just how professors and mentors really listened. Whether it was, to help you understand what you were going through, in terms of course material or about your journey, right? And kind of the one moment that really sticks out for me was after freshman year studying abroad in Italy. I think we were in Pesta. I'm trying to think, where were we? I think we were below Naples, seeing some old Greek ruins, and I remember walking back with Judy at the end and just talking to her. It's like, this is my first time abroad, first person in my immediate family being, and just like talking about the experience, right? And kind of what I want to accomplish. And I started to kind of toy around with this idea of working on human rights, being an advocate of sorts. And she just gave me some really good, constructive feedback. It's like, hey, you probably want to, really look at, okay, how do I grow into an effective communicator, both kind of written, oral? It's like, that's going to be a really key component for you to go and be successful at those things. And I just always remember, like, that one, I can picture us walking down the road of that being a really pivotal point, coming back and kind of helping me put myself on a trajectory of, okay, how do I start collecting skills? How do I take this class, that class, get this exposure, meet these people, and kind of, put yourself in situations to meet the people who are going to help propel you. So as I think back, I think that was a really pivotal point of just advice and guidance, advising a to-be future lawyer in Italian studies, right? And that's where I always kind of go back to Emory. Everyone's very, okay, is this pre-med? Is it not pre-med? It's like, look, you can learn from everyone. I think, Alex, you mentioned that earlier in one of your remarks of, look, everyone you can learn from and can help guide you. So I think that was one piece I really took away from the whole experience.
Thank you. Any question? Yes, I have one. One suggestion, just for us, for the professors. What should, if you could tell us something, what would you tell us? be whatever.
That's hard. Like Andrew, I had a great experience. I don't know where I could critique.
Yes.
I'm not going to critique any professors at Emory because I don't have critiques in that sense. But being on the side of having undergrads myself come to me to office hours asking for advice about, not about the class or something, but they really just wanted to talk and learn something about what it is to grow up, I think. And I think what I found is this is sort of what everyone has been saying, which is they're really hungry for advice or for some sort of guidance. And I wish, or, that's maybe something I should have been more open about when I was a student, which was trying to seek out more advice, as Jaren was talking about with, you can learn from any professor about the kind of career paths that are open to you that aren't necessarily in your major, but something that your professors will nonetheless know how to advise you about how to go about doing it. And just being open to those conversations is really something I should have done more when I was an undergrad, but I just didn't think about it because I was just not thinking in that way. But I think people are more aware nowadays with the way that society is more interconnected. It makes it a little bit more, okay, I need to do these things in order to be successful in these fields. And undergrads are a lot more aware of that they have to gain these skills, right? And gaining skills is, now that I'm applying for private industry jobs, I see like one of the foundational aspects of resumes and of like getting jobs, which is having actual skills that you can, not just soft skills, but also really hard ones too. Learning statistical analysis, right? That's a hard skill that seems boring, but can be really important for gaining some sort of job in a private business, for example.
The one thing I would add is work across other schools and across other disciplines to present to students how you could use French in your career in different, like in a multi-institutional or many different ways that you can use French language in your career. So like, not just the French department presenting it, I'm talking about, like, say, for example, French department of political science partnering and saying, how you could use French language in this particular field. I think often maybe students might be stuck in a siloed approach of thinking that you only use French and French language, period, and not really seeing how else you can use French in other fields. So I'm thinking maybe if at the university side, we take the initiative to show them this, disciplinary approach, then maybe it would resonate on how else you could use this French language or languages in general in different aspects of your life or in different industries. And I think what you're doing already in connecting it to careers and inviting alumni to speak is really awesome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I'd offer the reassurance that I feel as though students who go through this discipline are very connected to this discipline, perhaps more so. It's sort of like when people say, where are you from? And someone says like the United States versus New York. It's like, where'd you go to school? I went to Emory, but I'm very focused on saying I was an Italian studies major. It's my connection is more to that unit within Emory than it is to the school as a whole. And so I guess it's the reinforcement for you all that you are doing something right and that is happening, that connection is happening. And to the extent that you can encourage the students that are going through your program to find that connection to you. I do think that there are all different kinds of students, obviously, and diversity among those students may mean that some people are more eager to come knock on your door some people are more interested in coming to an alumni panel, whatever it is. So the more different touches that you have, the more likely they are to take advantage of the opportunity to sit down and have those meaningful conversations that Andrew and Jaren mentioned. And I think, you know, all of us have said some version of like, we would take more advantage of that if we could go do it again. So I think the reassurance that you're doing something right, and then, you know, the more you can encourage students to do that, the better.
Thank you very much. Alex, do you want to?
I just want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists again for joining us this afternoon. Sophia, do you have any closing remarks for us?
No, I just want to echo everybody's thanks. I'm so grateful that you all could come back and join us and share this wisdom and insight. You all are the best ambassadors for the amazing training that you got in the French and Italian Studies department. And we're just grateful for your time. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind current students contacting you, if you could put your email address in the chat. You're certainly not obligated to do so, but they may reach out to you. And we hope to see you guys in person on campus perhaps one day soon. And if there's nothing else, Simona?
Be in touch, please be in touch. Maybe we can invite you over in a class one day, and that would be nice too. You can talk about your job, or you can say something in Italian or in French. You can read something. That would be nice. Andrew, you could have a class in Italian, in literature, whatever. Yeah,
I'd love to. Yeah,
that would be great. And so then you have, yes, the emails are there.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Take really good care, and let's stay in touch. And we hope to see you guys all in person soon.
Grazie mille.
Merci beaucoup.
Everyone.
Au revoir.